how do you manage to keep this thing from veering left? Because I have been invited to go speak at Google HQ and Facebook HQ, and I've been asked by their CEOs and others over the years, how do we make our products more fair? How do we understand the right half of the country, since tech historically has leaned left and is based in a sort of a left-wing town, and, it tends to be populated like news with mostly lefties. So what do we do? And I told them all the same thing. Get more actual Republicans or conservatives in your organizations in an editorial role. They don't have to dominate it, but get them in there, get them a seat at the table. And Steve, they did not listen to me, and they should have. So how do you manage this?
Well, we have pretty strong culture around being unbiased. And because we're using government data, it's hard to, and we don't try to forecast. We don't try to say what the cause of something was. We just say, here's the current state of affairs. I mean, look, if both parties can't somehow agree that inflation was X versus Y, that's a problem. Where might it go in the future? Who caused it? So we stay very principled around that. I also tell us to avoid adjectives wherever possible. Adjectives, words, they can sound partisan. Numbers are not partisan. 3 is 3, 2 is 2. Some people might say, 3 is hugely bigger than 2. It's 1.5 times. But if it's in the context of 100, so we're very careful to provide historical context in terms of other numbers that government produces. And if we do those things, I think we've been able to stay well anchored. Now, also before we first published, we had some folks, political folks, on both the right and the left take a look at our stuff and say, hey, what do you see? What are we missing? Are we showing bias in what we're doing? And consistently since then, I've gone to DC every year. We've had bipartisan groups of senators together a number of times now, and nobody's actually picked on that one key aspect. Now, of course, there are various numbers that are more interesting to one party or the other, but that's on them. I want to make sure the numbers are clear, presented well. How they choose to use them, that's a political statement. That's a partisan statement.
You can't, now in the future, you can't go to Washington. You can't talk to senators and congressmen for this. You have to come to people like me because they all want your money. I don't want anything from you. You need people who
slow down. I am not a political donor. There are a few causes I care about. I am not a political donor. Now, I don't control my wife, and if you look at her history, it would tend to be more left than right. But there are issues that I care about. But basically, I will not participate supporting candidates on either side.
I appreciate that.
Including now some old friends. I have an old friend from Microsoft who I know is very smart, et cetera, but I won't support her because I don't want to take partisan positions.
Well, it's funny because in my role, I don't make any political donations. It's not appropriate for a journalist to do that. But at some shops, they'll let you. And I always felt like that was just a deeply wrong thing to do. And most news organizations feel the same. They just, once you've put money into something, you've actually, made a bet with money on something. It's very hard not to have a bias in favor of the something. So I appreciate that. I mean, I wish more people would follow your lead, including celebrities who make it almost impossible for us to watch them because they're so hard partisan on one side. It's like, well, now that I know you can't stand me, how am I going to enjoy you on the big screen? So thank you for not ruining the LA Clippers for us, even though I honestly barely knew that was a basketball team before this week. I'm so into sports, Steve. I've got to confess the truth. Now, you mentioned no adjectives on usafacts.org. That to me seems antithetical to who you are based on what I've seen, just in clips of you at the Microsoft meetings and you and at the Clippers. There's not a more adjective prone, enthusiastic cheerleader for the things that you get involved with. The no adjectives must have been hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll also sort of put up front, there are some adjectives that get used, but we try to avoid largely. I mean, for
Measured.
me, measured, and show the numbers. Yes, I'm a huge fan. I was a fan of Microsoft as well as a participant, a fan of the Clippers. But the one thing I like better, actually, than my fandom is numbers. Math was my sort of key skill growing up. I
Perfect
brought
800
that
on the
kind
math
of
SAT.
objective. That got exaggerated. It was 790, but Wikipedia was a little off on that. But that's okay. That's false news, but I can't change those. It's a Wikipedia issue. But at the same time, I do love numbers. I think they tell stories. I made this point even in sports, football. Tom Brady, when he was playing and quarterbacks, they have to have a sense of how far people away, where are they going? And in a sense, it's almost like a numerical puzzle. So I love numbers. I love to use numbers. And I'm very disciplined about not letting my enthusiasm for things get in the way of what the numbers actually say.
Well, it's interesting because some of the people I've trusted most over the past few years as we've started edging toward a post-factual world, at least in politics and public messaging, are economists. They're math guys at heart, because math does still add up unless you inject something weird into it. This is not my area of expertise. It's not my forte, but I appreciate people with a strong background in math because they tend to make the most sense. I did want to ask you about that because a couple of things about you. So, okay, 790. I mean, you should have tried a little harder, but that's fine. 790 is fine. So you get into Harvard, self-made, as I said. Now, when you were a kid rising to the top of your class as a high schooler, were you an incredibly hard worker, or were you one of those kids that this just came easily to you? It was just natural for you?
I'd say a little bit of both. A little bit. I was a very hard worker, and writing never came easy to me. Math, speaking did come easy to me, which is why I pushed through the math curriculum in my high school in 2 years and started taking college math courses, because I believe it's helpful for people to pursue things that they're good at, but passionate enough to really, bust their butts, so to speak, to be good at it.
Okay, there's a lot at stake in this upcoming election, as you know. But regardless of who is sitting in the White House, the fuse on this volatile economy has already been lit. Even 4 years of a conservative presidency might not be enough to turn the tide on our $35 trillion national debt. And if the left wins, it's like throwing gas on a dumpster fire. But one thing you could consider is to protect your savings by diversifying into gold with the help of Birch Gold Group. For millennia, gold has stood firm in the face of greedy governments, economic upheavals, and global strife. And it can protect you right now. Birch Gold will help you convert an IRA or a 401k into an IRA in physical gold, tax-free and penalty-free. And it doesn't cost you a penny out of pocket. In the past 4 years, the buying power of the US dollar has declined, and the price of gold has increased 40%. Text MK to 989898 to learn more. They'll send you a free info kit on gold, and you can check it out for yourself. Consider Birch Gold to protect your savings with its A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau, and just text MK to the number 989898. Birch Gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.